not sure what odd twist of fate has got us at this conference. I feel like kind of two guys who should be at home programming and doing artwork instead of speaking to people who probably know a lot more about a lot of things than us. But we'll spew our brotherly wisdom here for as long as we can fill up this half hour, and maybe if there's time left, show some pretty pictures of some stuff we're working on. I was thinking there's this odd theme going through here. Philadelphia. I was born in Philadelphia.
Okay, where?
Yeah, Northeast Philly.
Oh.
Yeah, Rolling Hills Hospital.
Albert Einstein Hospital, Northern Division.
Almost got a job there.
Really?
Anyway, one thing. The other thing is kids, which I'll get to in a minute, and then in an odd kind of way, the idea that everybody applauded the idea of kids watching less TV, which is something I really like, and adults as well watching less TV, and that whole thing they do when they're not watching TV. That's our goal. The kids thing is a theme that's it's kind of close to our hearts because we got started building worlds that way. Oh, and by the way, Robin will talk. We finish each other's sentences, and this is, you have to understand, be patient with us. We're out of our element here. So normally we talk quite a bit with each other, you know, yelling, screaming, finishing each other's sentences, but he'll fill in some places here when we get to it. I also noticed you spelled his name wrong. So it's a Y in there, like in mist. The kid thing. It's so funny that we're up here because all we ever did to get started in this was kind of want to build worlds for kids and maybe for the kid in us. I still remember sitting down with Robin and just discussing the early manhole stuff that we got started on, and my idea of it was quite a bit different than what Robin had, but it was the idea that there was choice, it was not linear, that we weren't going to tell a story. My idea probably was a little more linear, but I wanted to branch off from that linear idea. Robin took my idea and drew a fire hydrant, drew a manhole, and I think probably was the first page of the book, except we never got to the second page because the manhole opened and we wanted to find out what was down there. And I mean, he was working in a basement doing all this and would send worlds to me that were completely immersive at that point in time, someplace I wanted to get lost in. Fulfilled an interesting desire to explore. I don't know where that comes from. I know it's healthy, and I know that kids seem to want to do it a lot more than adults, and it's probably good as adults if we continue to want to do that. I better grab my notes out here before I ramble on everywhere. This is a great format, by the way. I feel very comfortable. I wish there was a fire burning over here and I couldn't see you, and then I'd feel really... Let's see here. I need to, I should introduce a couple people. Speaking of kids, Robin's kids here, Alex, he came to keep us company. It's his first TED. And, and then I also need to introduce Richard Vanderwind, who's kind of co-directing the Riven project with Robin, and probably has just as much of a, or should be up here just as much as we should. So stand up, Richard. I was thinking, oh, I should go in and reminisce and do some stuff about Myst, but I'm afraid of that whole backlash thing. Seems like there's been so much Myst. Let's just skip it for now and go right to the next thing, and maybe we'll avoid a little of that Myst backlash that's been happening lately. Riven. all I want to do with Riven is kind of go into a little bit of our philosophy, what we're trying to do, what we're attempting to do to the next product. It's a scary thing to do a sequel. When we did Myst, those of you who have actually finished it, which I won't make you raise your hands, realized that it kind of begged to be completed. And it was never a finished story in our minds. So having Riven as a sequel is not exactly what we consider it. We consider it kind of to be almost the main part of this story. The bad part is that the bar is raised. We just can't do Myst again and have people go, ooh, wow, ooh. We've got to push things up. It's a good news, bad news. That's the bad news. We've got to push things up. That's also the good news. Also the good news is that we made enough money that we can push the thing up a little bit. The bad news is that it's all going into pushing the thing up a little bit. And, so it better be successful so at some point this vicious cycle can stop. We'll get into the future later. We shouldn't actually even be here. Riven is still in production, and actually it's kind of a nice excuse because if maybe the next milestone slips a couple days, I have a good excuse now. It's that TED thing. I had to prepare for that. I had to throw some pictures and get ready for it. So, John, I'm blaming it on you. John Baker from Bund, he wanted me to come here. It's his fault. I've got people to blame now. We should be back doing what we feel comfortable doing, which is Robin and Richard designing, cranking away at the SGIs, making models, building this world, and me kind of putting it together. It's scary to think of how long it's been, how long we've been working on this thing, and that we're actually starting to see the light at the end of the tunnel. This is not just a Myst project for us. It's been a long, hard haul. Once again, though, we're doing this for us to some extent, and there's always a risk of when you do things for yourself, not pleasing everybody. But that also might be a theme that runs through a lot of these talks. I think there's a real potential for success when you strive for your best and you do what you want, what you see as good. You don't do the marketing surveys and the demographic analysis. So if you don't like Riven, it's just because you don't necessarily like what we like. We hope you do. Go into a few of the things that are different with Riven and a little bit of our design philosophy, and Robin can fill in some blanks. We are definitely in an incredibly enviable position. As we sit, I mean, in the heat of the battle, it doesn't seem very enviable as we're missing deadlines or making deadlines. Of course, we'd never miss deadlines. But it doesn't seem very enviable. But when you look at the big picture, I mean, we get to build worlds. That's all we ever wanted to do with our original children's software, was build worlds. Now, we get to build worlds with things like SGI workstations at our fingertips, and a design team of people who we consider to be some of the most talented around. I mean, that's amazing to be able to make these worlds, to create these worlds. It's a little bit of the writing of the books, being able to write books that link to other worlds. It's a little bit of that feel. Our medium, anybody who's involved in a creative process has that same feeling, though. If you're making movies, making television, you have that same feeling of making worlds. Our medium's different. The interactive medium, for better, for worse, and we're going to actually describe both, but for better, actually lets you have the choice in that world. That's incredible. That is absolutely incredible. If I don't want to go here, I can turn around and go the other way. I can explore at my own pace or not explore. I can enjoy or choose not to enjoy any part of this world that I'm involved in. We were talking to Curtis last night. Corbis, and it's the same thing that they do in any kind of interactive field. You put this stuff out there and let people explore at their own pace. Now there's some real hitches with that, but Robin can handle some of the hitches. I'll go into some of the things that are interesting. What that means for us designing our worlds is that, and if you look at the progression from Manhole on, you realize that all we have to do to design these worlds, the only thing, it's fairly trivial, is look at the example all around us and just copy it. The world's there. We live in it. We don't experience real exciting parts of it a lot of times, and some of it's kind of boring, so we can tweak those things. But the examples are there in front of us. And one of the things that's so exciting about the real world is the detail, is the amount of detail in everything, in absolutely everything. To some extent, anything I show you is going to pale in comparison of the real world and our awe for that. A tree, we design trees, and our trees look real. The trees in the real world function at the lowest level, with building blocks that work. That just is phenomenal to me. The detail can go as deep as you want to put it. That's one of the things that we really felt we wanted to add to Riven. We need more detail. We wanted this to be a real experience to some extent. Detail in the images and other areas as well, in sound, music, all those elements that make up the experience. And in addition, the last item, and then I'll let Robin take over, the detail in story. Interactive is tricky. We wanted to add more detail into the story as well. That's where it gets tricky. That's where, go ahead.
That's for me, huh? I just wanted to talk a little bit about story and a little bit about my own motivations for doing this kind of work, or working in well, working at all, doing any sort of creative work. I think it's the same for most artists and most people probably, and to a small extent, we all want to change the world. That's a grand statement, I guess, but it's certainly what I want to do. And what that means to me, when I see a movie, we've all seen movies, read books, or any of that type of thing, where something has some sort of profound effect on us emotionally. It causes us to change our mind on a specific issue or to change our way of life. When that happens to me, that's the most precious aspect of art. When something can affect me in that way, I always stand aghast. I always stand back. I'm just awed at what art can do, what a creative work can do. It's incredible, and it inspires me to think that, sheesh, boy, this is what I want to do. This is, I want to change people like this. I think the way I've been most changed or most affected by creative work is in story. That's what really gets me, is seeing character, seeing plot, seeing the theme and story, and how all of that works together, how it's all manipulated by an artist to just affect me in very specific ways throughout the course of a work. When we started on Mist, we had certain aspirations to change people in that way. We got bogged down in a lot of the details of interactive, what interactive was. There was so much of it that was hard to get at and figure out. We didn't know what to do. When we started Riven, though, we had kind of figured out some elements of interactive, and we felt like, okay, good. Let's try and change people with this a little bit. Let's try and create a work that has a real effect on people. And I think we've really learned some things about the interactive medium to an extent while working on it. Putting story into this medium is a little difficult. story has been handed down through the ages in a very linear format. And I've only started thinking about that recently and wondering perhaps if maybe the reason because of that is because it's more powerful that way. Story is, I think of a storyteller. I think of how a storyteller, how she tells a story to her audience and how she is at every step along the way just creating tension or creating a sadness at the perfect time or building up to a sort of a climax at a specific time. And when I imagine that same scenario of that storyteller with the audience interjecting and saying, well no, do this now. I want to do this now. I'm a character and I want to do this, and then the storyteller having to change and react to that. And what happens to me is it's kind of a comic thing. It becomes almost comical. It's like I can't imagine an audience taking a storyteller seriously. To a certain extent, that is exactly what we run across in our interactive medium. It seems to me as if it's very, very, very difficult for an audience to take a medium seriously. They may run into a character who is going through some sort of emotional trauma, and this character is talking to the player or the audience. The difference in interactive is that the player then can click and turn around and walk away. They can stop the drama. They can change the drama and do it a different way. And all of a sudden the artist, which is us, loses the ability to provoke the audience. We lose the ability to provoke the player because the player can do whatever they want to do. The player is the character, and that character can do whatever they want to do within the context of our story. So that's been a real frustration, a surprising frustration for us on this project because I felt that we could do so much more, and I'm seeing that there's a lot of limitations. However, I do think that the amount of story that has been put into interactive types of projects up until this point has been just minuscule. We've basically scratched the surface. This medium offers a lot of very, very strong advantages, and I think the strongest one is more than a lot of other mediums, it completely immerses the audience in a world. The audience actually can believe, if it's all put together correctly, that they are truly in this place. And if there is story present in that place, if there's story in every object, if there's comments in the environment about the characters in this story, the audience can, to a very large extent, get a lot of story out of this. And that's more than anything, I think, what we have striven to do with our current project. But even so, we're still just barely scratching the surface. There's just so much more to be developed and defined. But to us, getting that story in there at this point now is extremely vital. That's why we do this. That's why we do it. I think we should probably show a few of these pictures, though.
You can stay there. I'll take the controls.
Okay.
Take the pilot seat here.
We're going to show a few images from Riven, and we're going to explain at least a little bit about the detail and the story that we've tried to put into these just a few scenes, just a couple scenes.
Where'd my Mac go?
Is this the first time you're showing these?
Yeah, as a matter of fact, a lot of these images are going to be the first time we've ever shown these.
I don't have a Mac here. Does this need to be switched over somehow? Working only moments ago. It's nothing. Can we just bring it up there? This is all planned. These are never before scenes. Talk amongst yourselves. There we go.
How are we on time? How are we on time, by the way?
You're doing fine.
It couldn't be better than that, right?
Okay. We're getting there. What we're going to show you actually is we've got two pieces of kind of a presentation we'll go through. The first one is just some examples that are, none of this is real flashy. I mean, if we had time to put together something very flashy, we would really be in big trouble. We really are working hard on stuff. But nevertheless, we brought down some of kind of the coolest stuff, but it's not flashy stuff, it's just deep. We want to point out some of the details that we may have talked about a little bit, the level that we're going to. And then we've got one more, kind of a simple...
Great.
All right, should work. We've got kind of a simple slideshow that we'll run through quickly that's won't take a lot of explanation on our part and ends with some QuickTime animation from the sequel. Robin, I don't know how much you want to discuss this or...
Yeah,
Okay.
I can talk a bit. This is an image, may seem a little odd, of a skull. And this is how we've used it in architectural form in the game, if we want to call it that, the game itself. This is an image of a certain creature, this skull. It's from a creature in the game, and it's something that is, in and of itself, very much worked into the story. In other words, you encounter this all over the place, and it has a very strong representation with our main character. In this way, every time you would see this, after a while, it would begin to mean something very important. It's not just like you would see it built into any architectural form or see it swing around in the ocean and think, oh, gee, what a neat creature. It is story. That's just an example of how we're trying to work story into a kind of an environment as much as we possibly can.
This is all kind of tricky because we've got to tell you stuff that we don't want to tell you. So bear with us a little bit. The other interesting aspect is just that I think what I wanted Robin to point out as well as story is we're trying to do not just surfacey kind of stuff. When we put tusks on a creature, we really want the texture to be there at a level that's probably a lot higher than you'll ever see. We want it to be more realistic than you may need to see, and that's just. I hope that typifies what we're doing in Riven in particular.
This is just an image of a design sketch. We've done millions of these before we actually go into any of our designs. Because even in every aspect of our work, it's very important for us for it all to have a lot of meaning, because that is what's going to give the experience meaning when someone walks through it.
Robin actually knows how this thing works.
Yeah, it's one of our vehicles. This is that design. This is that build. What you just saw, that sketch. It's just a ship you take from place to place. This is just going to be a quick example of kind of the amount of detail we put in. The detail, more than anything else, makes the environment believable. If it's not believable, no one really is going to take it very seriously at all. You may or may not be able to see kind of the texturing. You can look especially in the rails beside those stairs. It's just, we've tried to get as small or as great amount of detail as we possibly could. This is kind of a close-up of the machine. A lot of this stuff is, you may or may, I don't think here you'd probably be getting as close as this, but even if we went on closer and closer into these things, there's just spent a lot of our time putting in so much detail that, once again, makes it all more believable.
Did we mention the word detail?
This is a close-up of that watch that was on the table just a moment ago. This watch was actually designed to work and to make sense once again with the whole story. There's a history to this watch. Every time you see pieces like that in the environment, we believe that it makes you feel like there's depth there. This is a room, and I'll take this as an example to kind of show how story is built into this particular room. Our main character has built this room, and it's kind of has religious significance almost to him. It's built out of a lot of the elements he uses to make books. The columns are just trunks of trees. There's these models or forms of bugs. You can see them on each pillar. They are what he extracts ink from when he writes these books. And of course, I'm talking about the books that he writes that link to other ages, which you may be familiar with if you played Myst at all. The symbol on the floor, that's something that was in his heritage that's been handed down to him. It's kind of like his coat of arms. He has made some slight changes in it, and in fact has kind of made some changes that aren't exactly appropriate in that symbol, which you would all discover this during the course of walking through this environment. This is a close-up of one of these models. It's actually a wooden model, gold-leafed, which actually turns out, once you open it, to be a viewer of sorts into which you can look. There's 5 of these around the room, and in this particular room, each viewer shows an image of this person's history, who's made this room, this main character's history, or at least his history, how he perceives it. In this particular panel, he shows himself at the top and then his 5 ministers below him and the individual areas over which they're in charge. This is some of the writing on the wall. We actually invented a language of sorts for the game. And these are, if you could translate it, you would be able to, it would all make sense in the context of this room. That's the name.
Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to... We're going to now just go through a real quick slideshow, just show you a bunch of images very quickly.
At the end of this, there's some QuickTime animation, and some of them have sound. So if we could have the sound on the monitor toward the end, or on the Mac as well toward the end. The disclaimer is, once again, these are thrown together. It's not made to be flashy. It's to give you a preview like no one's ever had before. This stuff we keep pretty close, and in fact, this stuff won't be on the CD, this next little section, so watch closely. This is the only place, as far as I know, that it'll be showing. Now, believe it or not, at this point, we were actually trying to discuss what we should do to finish up. So I decided, Richard actually said, well, you need to discuss the future. So I wrote down future on a card, and then that's about as far as I got.
In short, we don't have time to think about the future right now, so.
You've got the present to think about. It's a real pleasure to be here. Thank you.
Thanks.
I do. Come on. We have some presents and some gifts for you. But now, the prediction of when it's going to be done. I mean, bad, good scenario. What are the scenarios? The range.
We're
This time next year?
No. We're hoping to end of the summer, fall kind of thing. I think it's doable.
Do you think, would you come back in a year from now and or whatever conference it's ready for and take us on a journey?
We better make sure how nervous we're after this one. I think it went okay.
It went okay.
No,
Okay.
I think it'd be great. I'd like to come next time when we can spend a little more time.
And take us on a journey.
It's much nicer when when we'll actually be able to show people, you know.
Yeah.
These guys were coming 3 times and not coming 3 times here. It was on again, off again, and I didn't even know till this morning whether they were going to show up.